wonderful. Okay, I want to start differently than I have with some of the other episodes that I've recorded. At the end of each episode, I've been doing these fun kind of lightning round, rapid fire questions, not subject related, just to have a little fun and have people get a glimpse into the human that I'm speaking to. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to change it up today. I'm going to change it up, and we're going to start with that. None of these questions I've given you in advance. So permission to say pass. The goal is to just kind of see what your gut answers are so that we can get a glimpse into the human side of Spud, not necessarily the work, creative, community designer side of Spud. Does that sound
all right?
good?
I'm on the edge of my seat. Curious what you got.
Okay. What is a cheap meal you frequently ate while couch hopping in the early parts of your career that you still enjoy?
Ooh. Well, the early part of my career, a basement space I found on Craigslist, was underneath a Dunkin' Donuts, and so I ate a lot of Dunkin' Donuts for probably far too long, and I still don't mind hitting up a good Dunkin' Donuts every now and
What's your go-to Dunkin' Donut?
then. Ooh,
Blueberry?
peanut butter. So the peanut butter cream donuts, which I mean, we can geek out on Dunkin' Donuts if we'd like, but there are two different types of, I think, franchisees within the network, and some of them have the peanut butter donuts, and others they make like in house and they don't, and so you have to find the right location.
That would be a really fun rabbit trail to go down. Let's just make an hour
We
conversation
should, right?
around.
I'm sure your listeners would love that.
Totally. Totally. Okay. What is the most clever nickname someone has ever come up for you?
All right. Well, so my official nickname is Spud. We can get into my real name if we need to, but my real name is not Spud. There's the spoiler alert. So I feel like I get lots of potato variants, but probably less so for me and more for my siblings. And so I feel bad they have inherited this nickname over the years, and so teachers call them Frenchie and tater tot and you name it. They've got some potato variant, which as the oldest of four siblings, I regret to inherit or to pass that down that inheritance to them.
Staying in that lane, total impromptu. This
Yeah.
question isn't planned. If you were a potato, which one would you want to be?
Ooh. So I actually had a client on a giant event that I was running ask their entire crowd of like 200 people to do answer that exact question in the chat. Um, I mean, I'm a big sweet potato fan. So sweet potato with like some good cinnamon, like butter, that hits the spot.
What's a surprising place or situation where you find peace?
Oh, fine piece. I mean, a creek, sitting along a creek. I don't know if that's surprising, but that's my go-to spot is trickling water.
What's a bucket list scenario that you want to use a fog machine at?
Ooh. Bucket list for a fog machine. I mean, I've facilitated some weddings before, and I feel like I would love to bring a fog machine out in like a more formal capacity for someone's wedding. So, if anyone's looking for someone to officiate your wedding with a fog machine, I'm all open ears.
I love it. What was one of the inspirational quotes that used to hang in that basement storage office?
Ooh, a quote. Um, I don't know if we didn't have quotes, but the thing that comes to mind was we had one of these like old monkey animatronics. And I don't know how to describe it. It's like this little stuffed animal animatronic thing that was kind of motion censored. So if you walked by it and you triggered it in just the right way because it was super old, it would like kind of surprise at you. And it, over the years, it was in our office for many years. It represented this kind of tendency to like lean into the unknown and curiosity and those spontaneous moments. Every time you walked by, it didn't always trip, but occasionally, like something would happen. And I feel like that really like spoke to the ethos of what we were trying to create in those early days. Was like spaces for serendipity and spontaneous connection to happen. And that monkey caught many people off guard. They did not know it was animatronic. So not a quote, but it was a clear memory maker, I think, from those early years.
I like it. The Italianos are hosting a potluck brainstorm. What dish are you bringing?
Ooh, it's going to be dessert of some sort, and it's probably going to be some type of peanut butter chocolate related thing. Um, if you've got a fire in your backyard, I'll bring the s'mores with peanut butter cups instead of chocolate. So
A big peanut butter fan.
I'm a big peanut butter and chocolate fan over here. So
Are
yeah,
you are you like Team Jif Creamy or Peter Pan? Like, do you venture out? You don't
no,
care about the brand?
no. I mean, my wife really like controls which type of peanut butter comes into our house, and so I really just kind of go with the flow with whatever comes.
Nice. My husband has had two peanut butter and jellies every single day since he was a child, and he is a Jif Creamy all the
Wow.
way. I buy the
That,
peanut butter, but he dictates
you know,
the
that's a
type of peanut.
commitment. Yeah.
Oh, yes, it is. A favorite material you've dumpster dived for? Dumpster dove?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know what the verb dumpster dove. Yeah. I once found in a dumpster these giant lights, which what I came to find out afterwards were uh, like uh, like a giant soccer field, like professional soccer field, is the huge stadium lights that light up those fields.
Mhm.
I found an entire dumpster full of them, and I took them, and I never found a purpose for them. And so then I just inherited like an entire dumpster full of these lights and had to put that back in the trash at some point. So, but I felt like there was something there I could have worked with. The time
If
in
you
my
had
life, just I didn't have enough storage. That's all it
Didn't have
was.
enough
So
storage. Okay, I got
yeah,
two more. If you had
yep.
to ride one ridiculous mode of transportation for 1 year, what would it be?
Oh, I wish I used to know how to ride. Actually, I'm going to change my answer. I was going to say unicycle. That was my go-to. However, what I really want to learn are those like giant stilt costumes. I've wanted to buy one of these for the longest of times. Some of them even, your arms have giant stilts. Um, that's what I would want to, parade around town in for a year.
What would you be dressed as though?
I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. The image in my
Sky's the
head
limit.
is for anyone who's been to Disney at Animal Kingdom. There used to be, and I don't know if it still is, but there was this like jungle creature that like when you walked in would like come out and they just looked like the forest, and so you couldn't tell that they were there. They were like up in the tree, and then they would like slowly move, and they were on these giant stilts. I would like to buy that costume if it ever comes out of the Disney warehouse someday.
I love it. One more. If there were a ball pit of ideas in your house right now, what would be scribbled on one of the balls?
I mean, there is likely a ball pit of ideas somewhere in my house. Oh gosh, the latest idea that I would probably put on one of those balls is I want to bring giant trolls to my town, giant artistic trolls, and so that is the current project I'm working
Okay, I can't leave that one. I have two. I'm sorry, I can't. I have two visuals of trolls. There's the like child of the '90s, like
on.
topless with the jeweled belly button with the crazy
Sure,
hair, but then there's like the mean under the bridge, ugly, scary trolls. So, what is the type
I'll
of troll
introduce
you're bringing?
a third troll into your lexicon here. So
Okay.
there is an artist. His name's Thomas Dambo. He's from Scandinavia. And his whole claim to fame is he builds these giant trolls out of reclaimed materials. So they're mostly made out of like old pallets. And he's been on a mission to build these all around the world. I don't know how many he's at now, but hundreds or so of these trolls. And the premise is these trolls are kind of like exploring the world around them and the impact that humans have had on the environment. And so it's kind of got this playful, quizzical, explorative kind of dynamic to it. And you find them and they're huge. Some of these are 20, 30 feet tall trolls. And they're just like hidden out in the woods. So you have to like go discover them. And I saw a YouTube that he posted saying, I want to build one in every state around the US. And Pennsylvania happened to not be one of those states that he's built in. And so I reached out to him. I said, hey, let's build it here. And so we are in talks at the moment. So
Wow.
we'll see.
You'll have to
I
send
was
me.
literally reading that email like 5 minutes before jumping on this call. So that is like fresh in my head right now.
Were you like, "Ooh, a win! He responded. We get a troll."
Well, so
That's
it's
awesome.
actually zooming back a little bit. I reached out about a year ago and instantly got a response. And I think that is one of these like, and we can dive into the actual conversation here today, but like this misconception, I think for a lot of people is like putting myself out there, making the ask, right? you put all these reasons in your head for why something might not actually come to fruition. And I've learned it to be the opposite, right? You put something out there, and more often than not, you get a response, right? In some form or another. So anyway, I got a response from him. And as soon as I did that, I was like, I need to host a potluck brainstorm around bringing trolls to my town. And so my wife and I hosted a troll themed potluck brainstorm with my 2 year old at the time, who is now obsessed with these trolls, and the community is now beginning to rally around it and figure out how to raise the funds and all that good stuff.
I think it might be a bucket list item now for me and my husband to attend one of your potluck brainstorms,
You got to
because
come
that's
hang out.
just about the coolest dinner party
I mean,
I've ever heard of.
this was our first brunch themed potluck brainstorm, which they're usually dinner themed. And one of the sound bites, the quotes, right, that like stuck with me after that event was, we had probably, I don't know, 40-ish people, 50 people in our house. And we're all sitting, and these are like older folks. There's some younger folks, but like they're above the age of 30, the majority of them, right, and older. And one person just like very seriously like commanded the space and was like, I need to acknowledge that like a bunch of adults that don't know each other just spent 2 hours together seriously talking about the need to bring trolls to our town. And like with like the intensity and seriousness of any other topic, but we're talking about like the importance of bringing play and levity, right, and this childlike wonder into our town. And let's approach that with like the seriousness of a crazy multi-million-dollar venture, right? And I loved that takeaway that people are like, let's actually take this serious, the need for play.
It's just, it takes takes the idea of community to another level, but also, my husband and I just went to one. When you go to a typical dinner party or a barbecue, and even if they're with friends that you love and enjoy,
Mm.
the conversations do somewhat stay in the same realm of kind of politeness, autopilot.
Yeah.
There's genuine interest, but oftentimes we don't have the mechanisms or the frameworks or the concepts like you have to break through that and have some really meaningful conversation. So that was one. I mean, I won't dive too much into the book today, but that was one. I was like, oh my gosh, potluck brainstorm. I hope one day that Craig and Heather Italiano make the invite list.
We've got a guest bedroom. Come hang out. We'll design a whole thing. One of the other latest projects that I would scribble on my ball pit of idea. I've got a kid. He's 2 years old right now. And we've been talking about the idea, like, should we co-write a children's book together? And part of it might be about telling the story of the potluck brainstorm and like the simple, profound nature of bringing together people around food and creative ideas. Do we tell that through the form of a children's book? So he and I may be co-authoring that together at some point. So we'll see what comes of that.
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is yes.
Yes.
Yes, you should. The world needs it. And there's beautiful and really meaningful, even for grown-ups, messages around the potluck analogy, around like you're bringing your gifts to the table, but you don't hoard them. You don't just decide who at the dinner gets to eat some of yours. You bring it, you leave it, you go, and then you make a new one. So write that book.
I will. I'll put it on my list. Talk to me in a year and we'll hopefully have it out in the world. So
yes. Your story, I have to say, and hang with me on this analogy here, but it's the one that I kept coming to when I was thinking about your story that I have been exposed to so far in your book and talking to you. And your story vibes like a late 90s, like Hollywood, like scrappy coming of age, small town crew, big dreams, like kind of entertaining vibe. Like there's this group of teenagers meets under a basketball hoop and they want to change the world, change their community, and they hop in an RV and they drive across the country, making stops at a place like an alternative elementary school horse farm, which that's apparently a thing. And you're dumpster diving and you're driving around with ball pits in your cars and you're riding bikes dressed like pirates, and you're buying old fraternity houses, all in the service of that basketball hoop dream of changing your community. Like, you can't make that up. Your life is a movie and it's fascinating. I don't even think I have a question after that. Just an observation.
I mean, the process of writing the book, right, and telling both the work that I know to be true, right, which is there is power in community, and there is this fear and trepidation for so many people of knowing how do I even step into cultivating and creating those spaces, right? And yet, it's the truth that I know to be true is it's actually like fairly simple, right? I'm going to host a potluck. Come hang out at my house, right? Like it's actually not that difficult. We've like over complexified things, I think. And so writing that book helped tell that story while also simultaneously like doing this like look back of like, here's the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, right, of stories and moments and these like pivotal inflection points that led me to do the work that I do today. And so it was a really grounding experience to have to like sit with that. Like that was my COVID project. So like I sat in the basement with my dog on a couch for many hours, just like writing and thinking and reflecting and rewriting. And yeah, it was a neat part.
One of the things that I think is really unique about what you do, and this isn't just in terms of how you wrote your book, this is also in terms of how you're encouraging others to create creative communities, is this, like, you seem to not prejudge or overanalyze an idea, or like the words unconventionally daring was a phrase that I wrote down. But I think it expands beyond just building communities. Like, have you had conversations around even your Canvas framework? They go beyond just building communities.
Mm. Yeah. So community is this word that is thrown around and used in so many different contexts, right?
So many.
And sometimes to a degree that I think it is getting misused and cobbled together to fit into a box, and
Ooh.
everything has to be community driven, right? And I don't think that always is the case, right? Especially when you're talking about businesses and organizations and the health and well-being of a group of people that are doing something together, right? That's got a community dynamic to it, and you can weave community elements into organizations and businesses, but they also like they are a defined part of your life and should not like encapsulate the entirety of your community within the places that you work, right? So I talk a lot about the spaces that you live, work, learn, and play, right? And those four buckets probably represent, 95% of the time that you spend in a given hour or a given day. Um, minus sleep, I suppose, is maybe the fifth bucket in there. But beyond that, right, like live, work, learn, and play, like those are the spaces where you are bumping shoulders, connecting, bouncing ideas around with people in different capacities. And so over the years, it was never an intentionally like sought out thing like, I'm graduating from college and I'm going to go like, make a difference in those four buckets. But as I began to look back at my career, I realized like, oh, this was a season where I was like really trying to cultivate community within spaces that we live. And then this is a space where, where you learn and where we play. And so I've had different seasons to my career with community at the heart. And sometimes it looks very different, right? Like I do a ton of organizational consulting work, right? And so I'm in the spaces where people work, kind of, applying some of these practices and principles.
So let's go back to the community in terms of like how you its original design and the community in which you live. So because there's a part of your story that I, throughout the whole book, was a looming curiosity, which was everything that led up to the basketball hoop moment. Because I mean, that's certainly like three teenagers under a basketball hoop make a pack, which I hope there was like a hand moment. That wasn't my teenage experience. I would argue that most teenagers can't wait to get out and go improve themselves somewhere else. That was certainly mine, but you all didn't. And so that was a big why, a big question that stuck out was, this isn't normal. So what happened leading up to it? Because clearly you all experienced something within your community that had such a profound impact on you that you made it your vocation to not only to improve the community in which you live, but then help other people in other communities improve theirs. So what led to that moment?
Yeah. So yeah, stitching together some of the timeline here. A couple friends of mine in the high school years made this pact, right? We're getting close to graduating high school. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do with our lives. Had no clue at that point, at least talking for myself. I was like a complete open book. And yeah, I remember this evening where we just like made this pact of like, let's like commit to doing things together in some form or fashion to make a real difference. Like we want to like see our lives and our skills and the things that we care about in service of others in the world around us. Um, there's probably a multitude of reasons and moments for where that kind of Genesis conversation came from. But after that conversation, some of us went different directions, right? So some people went to college elsewhere. One of my very close friends, Eric, and I, we went off to college together, spent many years together. We then went different ways for grad school, but we ultimately all came back together, right? And after I think kind of our like formative learning years, right, through higher education, so let's call it a 5 year window, we sort of all came back with this memory of that handshake moment under the basketball net, saying like, do we all still feel that? Like, are we all still aligned with like that original intent that we shared from long ago? And the form in which that came to be looked radically different than what I would have expected, right? Like I would say the recrystallizing of those relationships came. There were like two things that began to emerge. One of my friends, Eric, was really interested in getting off the ground this like sustainability incubator innovation space, and so he and I would talk about that quite frequently. That was one idea that was in the works. A second idea that was in the works was with another close friend of mine, Christian, who reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've got $1 million to start our dream company in." And that was it. And I hadn't talked to this guy in 5 years, mind you. So like
Wow.
during college, like we didn't stay in touch a ton. Turns out there was never $1 million. That's a story that never made it into the book.
Oh.
It's this crazy, elaborate flop of a venture, but we were committed. And the venture was starting this like talent agency in New York that was going to represent people for like their entire humanness, rather than just like seeing them as a piece of meat, and like, farming them off to the next gig. So anyway, so we were like launching both these ventures. One was called Pure, which was this talent agency, and the second was called New Leaf, which was this like innovation grassroots incubator space. And we decided we need a forgiving place to hang out and start this all up. And that town happened to be State College, which is where Eric and I went to college at Penn State. And this tiny little community, which at that time was not very receptive to new things, just became our sandbox, our place where we could play, where we could experiment. We knew a lot of people, so we could sleep on folks' couches, right? So we had like zero living costs. We were able to find a little place on Craigslist in a basement underneath Dunkin' Donuts. That became the space that we worked 23 hours of a day. And so it just became a town that was actually really easy to try something without the pressures of having to like move really quick.
Mm.
We weren't in the big cities, right? We were just doing it at our own pace. And then we would travel to the cities to work on the talent agency. So we kind of had this like 1 foot in, 1 foot out mentality. And as time went on and the big city ventures kind of crashed and crumbled, I found that my heart really lied with these small towns, like the towns I grew up in, the town that I went to college in. Those were the spaces where I felt like so much was overlooked. And when we were talking about like spaces of innovation and creativity, you talk about the San Franciscos and the New Yorks and like all of these, coastal cities. You don't look at middle America and all of these other towns around the world that I think have so much ripe potential, and yet we don't give them the light of day. And so that's where I wanted to like pour into. And so I just started doing that in my own town. I started consulting and working with other communities to help them do that over the years. And that is what ultimately kind of a career evolved around. So yeah, so that like Genesis moment under the basketball net was, I think the thing that I look back on related to that was there were these very early relationships and friendships, right, that were like formed in like early elementary school. I had known Christian and Eric since I was, first grade, kindergarten, like that kind of time. And I think there is so much in our society, right? This like desire of like, I got to go do the next thing. I've got to go experience the next city, the next career. Like we're always like on the move, searching. And I think we don't take enough time to like actually just take stock of what's around us. And it's like, you might actually have the relationships, the skill sets, the resources that you need without actually realizing it, right? Because we're always looking what's above the horizon. And so I take that back as like one of the things that I'm like most fond of was that like here were these people that were in my life for years and years, and a basketball handshake, kind of commitment was just a I think a pretty naive but perhaps profound realization of like there's something here. Let's always come back to that, and let's make a choice to come back to these relationships, even as we begin to search over the horizons and go off to school and figure out our career paths. And so, all three of us, for whatever reason, chose to come back.
Chose to come back. It's so interesting. I like that you called it a Genesis moment. And I do like wondering and unpacking people's Genesis moments because there's so much. So when you think about somebody having a calling, and maybe I'll frame this in more relevant towards a question towards you. And you think about the Genesis moment, is the motivation towards like potential, like we can do this too in this town, or is it rooted in like struggle or injustice? Like I recently heard that what is the saying? I'm going to butcher it. Like your greatest struggles as a child end up becoming your greatest strengths.
Mm.
Like, was it just relationship based in turn? Like we loved our town, we can do this too. And we've got a great vibe of people that I've known for my whole childhood. Or was there like an injustice or the struggle moment?
Um, a bit of both. And I wouldn't say this was as clear in the early days, but as something with more therapy and looking back, time to look back. Um, I grew up in a family that had a lot of really amazing elements to it, right? One of four siblings. We were always doing things together. Lots of people would come hang out at our house and space. So we were a bit of a convening kind of entity in that sense. But there was also lots of mental health stuff, right? And I,
Mm.
growing up, and I would say more so as I like ventured off into college, right? So this was, or it became more apparent, and my connection to it within my family, I think, was more pronounced then. But lots of suicidality and needing to intervene, and I became kind of the peacemaker within
Mm.
the dynamics, right? Of like seeing other people's hurt and other people's pain and wanting to intervene, right? And I was always like sucked into those spaces to be a meaningful cog, right? And like help move things around. So I was the one that was like translating, like when two relationships were burned, right? I was the one that was like communicating to the person that was outcast and not like, part of the dynamic or the family or the friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've always played that kind of role. And I think that was pretty foundational, like to the work that I do now, which is seeing how both interpersonal dynamics and mental health components and all the individual stuff, how that like really jeopardizes our longing to be a part of community and in community. But then also not just the individual side, like looking at the systemic side, like there are systemic structures in place, whether you're looking at a family system or looking at a broader community or a town. There are systemic pain points that prevent people from finding belonging and connection. And so I would say it started on the individual. Like I felt that the most by seeing it play out in my family over many years, and being stuck in some of these like unhealthy dynamics, even though on the outside it looked great. Behind the scenes, there was a lot of hurt and a lot of relationships that were just not the most healing. And so I saw that on that personal level. And then as time went on, I started to see the systemic nature of it as well.
Mm.
And I think a lot of my work now like bridges those two. So like when I'm working with organizations, I'm very much looking at the system of it. But then I end up becoming like a default therapist, and I have no formal therapy training in whatsoever. And yet a lot of leaders and like middle managers and people that I'm working with like really like open up, and it's like, hey, this is like what I'm struggling with, and I don't know how to talk about these things or process these things or make this decision when the system is also not conducive to that. And so I find
Mm-hmm.
myself in this kind of interesting mix. But yeah, I would say that was very much like growing up having that kind of just like bedrock of relational dynamics, and then finally
Yeah.
understanding it for what it was when I was into my like college and young adult years.
I recently heard, I think it was the former Surgeon General on a podcast there, but the talking about connection as the, or no, sorry, not connection, community as the cure
Mm,
for this loneliness epidemic. And I really liked their perspective of like the feeling of community is kind of three parts. Actually, it was fulfillment, but let's run with it as community. It's
yeah.
relationships. It's at the intersection of relationships with purpose and service.
Mm,
So like you could have relationships in a community. Like I could know other moms.
yeah.
Um but if the nature of our relationship stays there, like that's community, but that's just a part, right? It's you're not really breaking the surface. It's not meaningful community. Now,
Right.
if you have aligned purposes, that's like next level. And then if you serve each other or together, like it creates that feeling of fulfillment, that rich community feel. But I
Yeah.
really liked that kind of three part, like the intersection of relationships, purpose, and service.
Yeah, I mean, it gets at this difference between like transactional relationships and transformational relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And you can apply this to lots of different contexts, right? If you're in an organization and like a leader of a group, you can think about it that way, or you can think of it as like, within the neighborhood that I live. But communities, like if you want to move communities from this like transactional space to more transformational relationships, you need to have two things, which is alignment and trust, right? And so if you're aligned around some shared purpose that you're talking about, and you've got the trust, right, the deep social capital and web of relationships, right, that the combination of those two things, that's what feels really transformational. And so then if you like zoom that back down to community and how do you define and work with this phrase, I define community as like a shared sense of belonging, right? So
Mm.
if you've got some shared sense of belonging, and there's a lot that can go into that phrase belonging, cultural identity, artifacts, language, jargon, right? But there's some shared sense of belonging. That's a community, right? So I've got like a plug-in hybrid car. And so anytime I drive on the car or out on the road and I see someone else with one of those little like light blue, uh, you know, some swirl or dash or thing on
Lightning.
their car, right? Like that, like indicates, okay, you're a hybrid or plug-in or something.
It's my people.
I feel like I've got some shared sense of belonging and connection, right? Like we have this shared thing. But I don't know who they are. I don't have any social capital or relationship built up with them. But there is this like, you could look at it as a community of people who are all part of this like plug-in hybrid and electric car community. So at its most basic form, some shared sense of belonging, that's what community is about. You can then break that down into a spectrum, right? So the spectrum is passive to dynamic. Passive is what I just described. We have some shared identity, some cause, something that we care about, but we don't have any actual relationship, and we're not actually trying to do anything. We're not aligned in some strategic purpose or direction. And so when you add in a shared sense of belonging, moving in a strategic direction, that's what a dynamic community looks like. And that's, I'm always trying to get people to that point, right? So how do we like take the passiveness that we have, which is a good starting point, and move us to this dynamic space? And it's like, okay, you got to build alignment, you got to build trust, and that the combination of those is like the strategic direction that you're starting to like push a community towards. So
Is this one of the for this spectrum? What do you call it? What do you have a name for this spectrum? Like dynamic community spectrum or
I probably should name it, huh? But it's just how
yeah,
I like. That's like the base level of how I think about community, and
sure.
then the alignment and trust piece often comes into the conversation when you're talking about building partnerships. So when we start scaffolding community up to the level of not just individual to individual, but partner to partner,
Mm-hmm.
there's similar forces at play, but slightly different. And so when you're trying to create really transformational partnerships, that's where having this alignment and trust is really critical. And so you're trying to do that on the organizational level. So I often don't talk about that piece too much until like I'm working with a group that's trying to strengthen and build those partnerships. When you're just meeting with people on an individual level, it's like, where are the spaces where you're leaning into? You've got some curiosity of like, oh, that's a group, that's an individual that might have some shared sense of belonging with me. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Just start building the relationships there. and then start moving it in a strategic direction. So yeah, that's kind of like the base of the work I do. And then there's, principles and strategies that apply on top of that.
Let's go into every single one. I'm just kidding.
Hey, I got time. Let's do it.
Let's go. No. Okay. So you're kind of naturally shifting the conversation in this direction. So I want to follow that. There seems to, just in conversations with you, an evident, maybe, I don't know if I'm calling it a passion shift or like a new passion, where there's this chunk of your story that's all around the building creative communities, helping other people develop their communities. But a recent kind of newly ignited passion that you shared with me is what you said is bridging the disconnect between the people on the ground and then the leaders who are meant to serve them. When did that shift happen? Why does that problem light you up?
Great question. I very much serve in the spirit and space of community, as it relates to the immediate pain that I am feeling within those spaces, right? So,
Sure.
So I'm a new dad, right? So that's like relatively new dad. So that has given me a different perspective than the first 10, 15 years of my career, which was like, I survived my 20s in a college town, which is pretty unheard of because most people graduate and then disappear and leave. And so I survived my 20s, my early 30s, and that first 10 years of my career was really serving this like, shoot, like I don't have any friends in this town. Like, where do I find them? Right? Like, I'm no longer a college student, and so the systems in place don't serve me as a young professional. And the next support systems that I saw in my town and state college were when you move back to this town as a young adult with young kids. And we have an amazing, rich, vibrant ecosystem if you've got young kids. But if you exist in the 25 to 35 range without kids, there was nothing here. And so those early days of my career was like, I'm going to solve that problem because that's the problem that I'm feeling as it relates to community. And so I created co-working spaces. I created, we bought a frat house. We turned it into a 21-person co-living space for young creative change makers. I started an arts and innovation, like gallery and event space that did like, giant pop-up block parties and all of that kind of thing. So I created the systems, the organizations that I wish I had. And because I tend to create fairly quickly, right? Every 3 years, I'm starting something different. I benefited from those creations, right? So the co-working space, I needed that. I needed a place to work. So I'm going to build it. I need a place to live. Okay, I'm going to go buy a frat house and get 20 other people to live with me. And I'm going to live in that community. And it was profound and transformational, right? So like I just kept creating the thing that I needed. That once I launched the arts and innovation space, which was called Three Dots, I helped get that up and running for a couple of years. And then literally the night my son was born was my last board meeting. And I said, hey guys, we're about to go into labor. I'm done. And so I disappeared at that point. And so that was, about 3 years ago now. And in that time, I've been like refilling my tanks, right? Like I don't have the energy so much to like pour into a small town and create a bunch of ventures for them. But where my heart started to move more towards was like along this process when I was like creating all these ventures. I've always done consulting. I've always had a facilitator practice called My Creative Community. And I was doing like really life-giving work with organizations that wanted to take what was happening, the magic that was happening in these small little ventures, and say, how do we bring this into a giant national foundation? How do we bring this into federal government? How do we bring this into the Department of Education, right? Like these big questions that like the potential for scale and transformation was really, really enticing. And so I just started like following that work. And that's where much of my work now is today. And then it's starting to come back to the point where it's like, okay, what are the things that I'm going to bring back into my town? We talked about trolls, right? Like that's one of the latest projects, right? Is just like, it's a way for me to like put my toe back in the water of my town and like start contributing to the community because I want fun places to take my kid to, right? I want to go to an arboretum with giant trolls that he gets to go play around on. Like that's a selfish desire, right?
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's like the best community spaces and ventures and organizations, I think, come from a place where someone is deeply feeling that need and then responding pretty quickly to it. So,
How are you helping leaders recognize that there's a disconnect between what they're saying or doing or the messaging versus what the people on the ground feel? Like, how do you help them even recognize that there is a disconnect?
Yeah. I mean, it feels cliche to say that, right? Every situation is different. But I think a lot of people grow into management and leadership roles. And they don't have training to do that, right? It just sort of is like forced on them. So like
Yeah.
folks in middle management, I think have a really tricky time because they're like having to both, serve folks beneath them and also report up. And it's just this kind of confusing space. And then I think leaders over time just get kind of disconnected from like the realities on the ground, and the little things that don't feel like much, but like, right, the way that you onboard someone into a culture in an organization is really really critical, right? Like they're trying to create touch points and like moments of connection, and for a leader they're like, yep, that's the right person. Like I spent all this effort into trying to like identify the right person to hire, and then you just kind of absorb them into the system, right? And assume it's just going to be natural. And I think they overlook a lot of those like small moments. And so when I'm often brought into an organization, it's like there's typically some type of immediate pain or an immediate gathering that they need help bringing some organization to, right? We've got this collective of nonprofits across the state, and we want to create like a statewide vision. And we don't know how to do that together because you've got now 40 different leaders of 40 different organizations that aren't used to having to collaborate. And so I tend to work at the intersection of that, like a collective of groups that don't typically convene, helping them convene well. And so that tends to be the starting point. And then in doing that work, which is often facilitating gatherings and strategic plans, then you get to like layer in some basic tools that are really like these like groundswell approaches that are like bringing voices from the ground up to the leader level, and then helping align that with the strategic, right? Because people on the ground, sometimes they're not always the ones that like hold strategy, right? Like that's a hard thing for a lot of people to hold, is like strategic thought. And so it's like, okay, how do I give language and tools, things like backcasting and all of these like little frameworks and tips? How do you introduce that to a group so that people on the ground are like, I can get behind that, right? Like I'm not lost in the strategic planning jargon, but this is something that makes sense to me and can be woven in up onto like the CEO executive level. So yes, it's a little bit of meeting them in the middle.
I'm curious with backcasting, because you introduced the concept. That was one of my favorite things in the book, but
Oh,
it was
great.
more of in the conversation of creating that vision, like charting your path. How are you weaving in the concept of backcasting into that example? Like, is it the people on the ground, like you're giving them the opportunity to backcast, or are you teaching the leaders to backcast so that people understand and are bought of the vision? Like, where do you insert it?
Yeah, I'll give you a concrete example because I think if we're not talking in story and like
Please.
talking in example, people can unless you really love geeking out about this kind of stuff, and maybe that's the audience of this podcast, they
Who
might just
knows?
enjoy that. But usually people need stories and concrete things to wrap their head around. So right now I've been working and I will continue to be working with a performing arts center. And they're at this really critical junction point where their space is about to have to go under renovation for asbestos. And so this building, which has been around for 50 years, part of a college, really like they just celebrated this year their 50th anniversary. It's been a pivotal place where the arts and culture come to life. The building itself is about to be gone for 2 years. And so what happens when that vacuum suddenly forms? Simultaneously, you've got all of these like grassroots arts and culture nonprofits and performing centers and things that are forming in the community. And there's never been a happy collaboration between the town and the gown, right? The university and the community. And you see that in lots of different communities, especially university towns. And so the director of the Performing Arts Center recognized we're about to have this pain point come up where we've got to figure out what to do with our building. Can we use this as an opportunity to address the silo dynamic that we often find ourselves in, right? We don't want to be the bad guy. We don't want to be the big gorilla that doesn't play well with the community folks. Like we actually want to be like equally invested in these conversations. So that was the immediate pain, right? And they wanted to do something. They wanted to figure out a strategic plan. They wanted to host some gatherings to help figure out what to do. So they had a vested interest. They need to figure out what happens with this space. And it introduced the opportunity then for us to like weave in a process where the community voices could come into the mix. And so what we did was over the course of 6 months, we ran a bunch of like leadership council, sort of like board members. We did a bunch of internal gatherings with them, like mapping out strategic planning, scenario planning, like what could this look like? And after about 4 to 6 months, that culminated in this giant community event that we did on the actual stage at the Performing Arts Center. And we invited every community group that we could think of into it. And we wanted to we aimed for about 100 people. And on the night of the event, we told them, hey, come to this gathering. It's going to be a chance to dream together, to think about how do we invest in the broader arts and culture ecosystem of our region. It was snowing. It was awful weather. It was like middle of January, like not a good time to host a gathering. We had 0% drop off. Everybody who RSVP'd showed up, which is unheard of for a gathering. And so there was this like eagerness to have the conversation. And so what we did that evening, we ran a process called World Cafe, which we talked about from a facilitation perspective, but it's a really powerful process that is essentially a potluck, right? Where like people are coming together and sharing ideas, but it's from grassroots up. And so we did that. And at the end of that event, we said, hey, if you were in the driver's seat of this Performing Arts Center, like which scenario would you pursue? Would you re-renovate the building? Would you collaborate with downtown groups and build a whole new space? There were all these different options of what we could do. And so we heard loud and clear some consensus around what people wanted to do. And that just wrapped up in January. And now we're starting a year-long process to like do formal feasibility studies. We'll have a series of touch points with community members and then that leadership council to like really map out like, here's the strategic plan, let's put it on the paper. But it like every 3 to 6 months, right? Like we're hosting these community gatherings, bringing in community voice, having the upper leadership and executive council right there so that like those conversations are happening together. And that's where the magic happens. But too often, strategic planning is never done from like a community grounded perspective. And so that is, I think, what is often new. I mean, the director, she shared afterwards, she's like, coming out of that event, she said, you gave me a win that I didn't realize I needed. And I think that is such a profound little quote that lots of leaders are unaware of, right? Like, when you involve the community from a ground up perspective in your strategic planning processes, when you're doing these backcasting and all this kind of stuff, you get a win that you didn't realize you needed because leaders aren't usually being measured for how they're involving the community voice and people on the bottom of the organization, right? Like that's not how we measure success sometimes. And so, but when you actually see it and experience it and come out the other end, you're like, oh, that's something that we need to track and be more intentional for.
Did what came out of that backcasting event, did it actually prove a disconnect from what was happening in the first, you said 3 to 4 months of strategic planning, then you had the event? Did a disconnect actually come about, or was it more of a validating experience that they were heading in the right direction?
In that scenario, it was a bit more of a validating. Partially because it's they're staring at a giant fundraising goal. And it's like, if we pursue the really cool vision, right? Which the cool vision is you build this whole new art center and it's got the local groups a part of it. It's got the university groups. It's this amazing North Star thing that we've created. That sounds great. It's easy to dream that up. But is there really buy-in? Is there consensus? Is there alignment and trust to actually pull off that vision? And so in that case, there was kind of a validation piece to it. Now there is still a year-long planning process that we have to go through to be like, is there really validation, right? Like, can we actually pull this off? Like, that's where the conversation gets kind of up into the leadership level where they have to map those pieces out. But throughout it, we're going to continue to weave in the community voice. So like our next gathering is in July and we'll do a kind of cultural asset map. So we'll bring all those people from January together. We'll map out our kind of region. It's like, okay, these are the building blocks we had to work with. And so that will then inform the next thing. So you continue to weave it in while leadership level is having their own kind of processing of the conversation coming out.
I love the idea of bringing in people at the ground level into the discernment process of whether it's strategic planning, change management, crisis management, like you name it. Even from an organizational standpoint, like you guys brought in people from the community in service of the Performing Arts Center, but within organizations, I mean, that would look like, a big decision that's being made at a senior level. I think a lot of times those decisions stay in one conference room with a core group of executive people, and they're doing they should, to the best of their abilities, considering the people that it's impacting. But they don't often think to, hey, let's get some voices from the bottom. One, they either don't think about it. Two, they think it's going to take too much time. Or three, they get scared that if more people find out that we're thinking about this, it's going to cause chaos because, changes are coming up. But but having experienced a lot of organizational change and big implementations and acquisitions and all the things, the people that stick around, you do find yourself craving. Like, I wish I could have been in the room on that decision for them to, like, did they not think about this? Like, you crave being heard or just even being considered.
Yeah.
So
and there's a lot to unpack here with this.
Yeah.
Typically, if they are going to involve the voice, the go-to solution is a survey. Well, we got to get the voice of the crowd and our employees, so let's put a survey out. There was a fascinating study done a couple of years ago where they had two different groups that had to go and get a questionnaire filled out, right? So it's like some 10-question questionnaire divided into two groups. And the one group had to go do it in person, right? Go out in the streets and try to get people to fill out this questionnaire. And the other group had to do it electronically, right? Email a bunch of people and have them fill this out. And they asked people ahead of time, like, how many people do you think are going to fill out your survey? And both groups said, roughly 5 out of 10, right? Half the people are going to fill out the survey when I make an ask. And what they found was this kind of profound insight. The people that made the ask in person versus doing it electronically through a survey were like 34 times more effective at getting people to participate.
Wow.
So what does that boil down to? For every 200 surveys that you send out, you would only have to talk to 6 people in person. And so when I convene a group of people, right, and I just ran a group a little bit ago, I was like, we've got 200 people here in the room to do this kind of, crowdsourced voice. I was like, take 200 people that you see around you and just multiply that by 30-ish, right? So we've got 6,000 voices represented here today because of the power of doing this in person. And I think we all intuitively know this, right? There's studies like that back up the claim that, like, doing this in person versus digitally is more powerful. The problem for leaders is that is a scary and hairy unknown to say, I'm going to bring a bunch of people together and I don't know what's going to come out of it. And this is where the power of a facilitator, right, is really useful. Sure. Like, they are skilled at guiding people through that conversation. But, right, you see all kinds of bad scenarios, right? Like, I see a lot of politicians right now that are, like, doing the town halls, right? And, like, town halls always go off the rails, regardless of which side of the political spectrum you're on. Like, there are not good examples of how we have community-centered, collective conversation around issues that matter to us. And town halls are not effective most often than not. And yet that's what leaders think of. Like, I don't want to get myself into that hot water, right? Where people are suddenly angry and I don't know how to, like, respond from the stage. And it's like, well, what if we get rid of the stage and there's no stage and we're all actual equal participants in this, right? Like, there are ways to fundamentally change that dynamic. So that's where it gets really fun. Like, when you get to work with a leader who, like, has given you a bit of an opportunity to come in and, like, carve that out, right? Of, like, here's the pain, right? We've got our Performing Arts Center is about to disappear. Great. Let me come in there and just, like, open that up a little bit and actually introduce some of these processes, World Cafe and Open Space and Story Harvest and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, that's what lights me up right now, is doing that kind of work.
I want to share with you, now I want to get into the book just with the little bit of time that we've got left. Only because, first of all, it was an absolute treat to read. Not because, well, I have like maybe 40 pages left, but it's been an absolute treat to read. But what's interesting is that I have never had a calling to improve the community in which I live at all. Like, that doesn't mean that that's just not what breaks my heart. That's not what I'm, what wakes me up every day. However, I still found in a surprising amount of impactful things. And so your book's called Designing Creative Communities, and yes, it's a book for that. But if I were to retitle this book as it relates to the impact that I personally got out of it, I'm calling it Designing Creative Courage,
Mm,
because I am a dreamer. But one of my greatest fears is never translating those dreams into action, like not becoming a doer. And so my Heather title for this
yeah.
book, and for anybody who's like, oh, I don't like, if you're like me, if you're want to start a business, if you're a dreamer, if you've got these ideas, like even if it doesn't have to do with improving the community in which you live, there's gold in this. So yes, I titled it Designing Creative Courage, How Dreamers Can Take Courageous, Unconventional First Steps to Becoming Doers. So to follow that, what do you think are some of the biggest stumbling blocks that keep dreamers from becoming doers?
Mm. Well, one, my mind started going down the route of, not to answer your question, of like, are we going to live in a world where books have custom titles for the person reading them, like with AI and all of this technology coming out? Like, I don't know. I just started to like envision like, what is a world where like every book is like retailored, like this is what you're going to get out of this, Heather, right?
Yes.
Because it knows you and it knows what's in the book. And
Courage.
anyway,
Courage.
that's
That's what I got.
fascinating. I'm sure someone is working on something like that in the publishing world. Um, yeah, what helps people go from dreamer to doer? I mean, I think there's part of this which is acknowledging your personality. And so I want to like share my personality as a bias. So I
Mm-hmm.
am someone that like naturally is inclined to doing. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want people to like hear my response knowing that that's my personality. And so I don't want you to like hear all of that and then feel like you've got to like, exactly put it onto try for you. Um, for me, what is helpful is finding like the very, very small little thing that is the next wise step that I can make. And to let go of the connection to this bigger vision and dream and purpose and thing that my life has to be rallied around. Like when you make that connection, most people end up in paralysis, right? Because it just feels too big. And so when my wife and I started doing the potluck brainstorm, we talked about that as an example. So many, many years ago, right? Like I did not have the vision for this creative arts and innovation center, which ultimately the potluck brainstorm turned into. Um, I just had a desire to like, I wish we had more people come hang out at our house. Like, it'd be nice to have more friends than the ones that are in our circle. And there's always these people I'm talking to on social media and like passing by in different organizations in town. It'd be nice if we could like actually see each other more regularly. Like, that was like the spot. Had I tried to connect that to like, I'm going to run this potluck brainstorm event at my house and it's going to lead to X, Y, and Z and this giant, profound change for our broader, like central Pennsylvania, that would have been even paralysis for me.
Yeah.
And yet that is the story that happened, right? Like my wife and I, we ran these monthly potluck brainstorms. A brand started forming around it, a following, like a cult following. People loved coming over to our house on a monthly basis. Out of that, we raised a whole bunch of money. We started this dedicated physical space. It's become like one of the most critical third spaces in our town. It is now like getting wide recognition across the mid-Atlantic for like the impact that it's having on our region, both economically, like retaining creative young talent. Like it's incredible. And it all started with people just hanging out at my house. And that's not the only Genesis moment, right? That's my Genesis moment related to this organization, Three Dots, that it ultimately became. If you talk to the head of our community foundation, she has a different Genesis moment. And she eventually came to the puzzle and was like, hey, I can contribute this and I want to help build this. And so like these different Genesis moments start to form. And so I think if you get stuck in that like dreaming to doing mentality is like, yes, do the backcasting, which backcasting is just like, what's the world that you want to live in? And rather than forecast towards it, just backcast to it of like, I can see that clearly. Now let me start here. And so it's like, create the vision and then disconnect yourself from the vision for a little bit and just say, I'm going to do something here. And in a month, in 3 months, 6 months, I'm going to pick my head up and say, is this moving in the right direction? Like, is this still aligned with that kind of backcast vision that I had for myself? If so, great. Put your head back down, go play, have some fun, experiment, prototype some things, and then pick your head back up. And constantly, as you start doing that, like pick your head up process, then it becomes more natural, right? Like I can do that on like a minute to minute basis, right? Crank on something, pick my head up and do something. And so like, I think you start to develop that skill set. So it comes very natural for me because it's like been baked into who I am and my personality for many years. But for a lot of people, if you're just starting, just try and then disconnect from the vision.
Yeah. That, I mean, that, and I'm glad that was very gracious of you to preface with this is your personality. And that it may not be everybody's, because that is not mine. And I think, but that was one of the things that inspired me in the book is that it just seems like you have this natural inclination to be like, let's just do it. Like, let's do it. Versus mine is like the big dream. And I almost get stuck in paralysis of the conventional ways to go about achieving the dream.
Mm.
And then you just get stuck. And then you go put it on the back burner. And every now and then it keeps creeping up. Like, that's how you know, like, you're onto something. Yeah. I love that you said something about the imposter syndrome. You have a fantastic line about imposter syndrome. That's like you're onto something really, really wise.
Oh yeah.
But it just
imposter
keeps coming
syndrome
back
is
up.
just like you like yeah, your body is like responding to like, this is a fear I should lean into, right? There's healthy fear and unhealthy fear.
Yes.
Right. Like you're walking in a back alley and something sketchy, like that's a healthy fear to listen to. But imposter syndrome is usually like the signal of like, hey, there's an unhealthy fear here that you should actually like lean further into that because you need to get past that in some way.
Yes. So yeah. It was very enjoyable for me to see the fruits of unconventional grassroots efforts. Yes, yours were all in service of your community, but those were mini businesses. Like you were an entrepreneur. And so for someone who is that, it was just like this moment of like permission to stop overthinking and to take the unconventional first step.
And I mean, to bring this into the moment of today, right? You talked about the Surgeon General reports on loneliness and the power of community and all this kind of stuff, but then layer in that, like all the AI stuff that's happening. And like, we are about to live in a time where the distinction between consumerism and creatorism is incredibly important, right? Because you're about to just be overwhelmed with a bunch of content and stuff and knowledge. And if you don't already feel that with social media, you're only going to feel it 10 times more in the months, years to come. And so if you can get out of that, like, I'm just going to consume, right, content mentality, which will lead to paralysis, like put yourself in a creator headspace and just start creating something. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be totally nonsensical. But in doing so, I think it'll rewire your brain to not always default into consume, right? Like, I mean, a odd, perhaps, way to think about this right now is like when I go to the bathroom, I just like doom scroll usually, right? Like that's my time to like, I don't have a toddler around me. Like I can just like consume. And lately in the last like month, I've been in a creator headspace. So like when I go to the bathroom, this is personal, but like I'm like playing with these AI tools to like build custom apps and stuff. And I'm like doing it in less than 5 minutes while I'm sitting in the bathroom, right? But like, it's like helping to rewire my brain. Like, even though I'm someone that naturally leans towards creating, like I'm trying to take advantage of these tools in a creator headspace rather than a consumption headspace in those little micro moments throughout your day. Because I think it helps rewire things in a healthy way.
You're so funny.
There you go. There's my bathroom habits.
I know. I'm like, how much do I want to fill? I'm going to let it go. I'm like, gosh, no wonder men just take so long in the restroom.
Yeah.
Hey, you're creating. That's what it is.
Exactly.
But I can't.
I'm working. It's on the clock, you know?
Oh, I can't empathize with like taking a few extra moments in a closed space of quiet with it. I have a 7-year-old. So like in the laundry room, the pantry, like anywhere you find in the car, like you take advantage of the moments. Absolutely. In whatever ways that you need at the time, whether it's AI tools or just some silence.
Yeah.
So yes, I just wanted to share that because, and again, I'm not going to go into the frameworks. People can read it on their own, but from someone who is a dreamer, and I've had this big, hairy, audacious dream for a while, that this gave me a really practical framework for doing that, like taking the first steps in a way that's not overwhelming, and kind of reignited the motivation towards working for that. So I loved it. I think I can't recommend it enough.
One of my favorite, I've been listening to Trevor Noah's podcast for a while,
Yeah.
but one of his recent episodes, he talks about how on the opposite side of anything that you try is a good story, whether it works
Yeah.
or not, right? And like when I look at my book, it's a collection of stories over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And there's some pretty good stories, I think, in there, right? And they all were on the other side of me just saying, you know what, I'm going to try. I'm going to see what happens.
Yes. Okay. I have one final question for you, and I'm going to take a page out of your actual book. Take a page where, so we're going to end with this. Let's pretend for a moment we're throwing a party for your Spud's future self. What should I be congratulating you on?
Oh, that's good. I am thinking a lot right now about the world that my kid will inherit. And I would love, in a selfish way, right, in 10 years' time, to be recognized or congratulated for like the role I played in helping create a world where it's not all doom for the kid, for what they're growing into, and that like on an individual parent level, like to like be able to look and see the small moments where like I brought my son into all of these creative efforts and things that I'm working on, but then also right the individual level, but then also systemically, like I don't know, I was reading some stories recently about some entrepreneurs that like created schools for their kids, and I was just like the beginning of a light bulb dimming on of like, do I create a school next? Is that the next thing that I do? I have no idea. I don't know if I feel passionately about that, but I feel like the next 10 years is schooling is going to be a pretty critical part for my kid as he goes from 2 to 12. And so, so I want to say that I played a role on both a systemic level as well as an individual dad level. So,
and it all starts with giant trolls in a park.
that's right.
That's
give
right.
give me 2 years. We're close. So I got to go reread that email that someone just sent this morning, and we'll see how close we are on our fundraising goals.
See how it just circles back? Just circled right back to that. Well, this was super fun. I'm incredibly grateful for your time. Incredibly grateful for your wisdom that you are sharing in the world. And I'm excited to circle back with you one day as my future self and be like, hey, I did the dream, and I did it because of these 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things that I read in here. So thank you.
Well, you can come share your story at a potluck brainstorm. You and your husband and family, come on up. That's how we'll celebrate. We'll have a 10-year future self party at a potluck brainstorm. So.
Absolutely.